Have you ever felt like you were fighting alone against something invisible, heavy, that tries to bring you down every day? Have you ever woken up with that feeling of oppression, as if something was draining your strength, your faith, your hope? Many people live trapped in silent spiritual battles. And the worst part, they believe that God is far away, that evil is stronger, that there is no way out. But what if I told you that there was a day when Jesus faced an entire army of demons, alone, and won? Yes, he not only won, he showed that no force of hell can resist his authority. In this video, you'll discover what really happened in that supernatural confrontation, and more importantly, how it reveals that you are not alone in this invisible war. If you watch until the end, you will understand the true power of Jesus over everything that ties you down, paralyzes you, and makes you think there is no way out. You will leave this video with your faith restored, with spiritual weapons in your hands, and with the certainty that there is deliverance, even in the most desperate situations. Now, if you have faced or are facing spiritual struggles, prove that you are ready to win. Comment below, "My war will end in victory." And tell us where you're watching from, because we want to know how far this message of liberation is reaching. Oh, and subscribe to the channel, because each new video here can be one more step towards your transformation. Let's go together until the end of this battle. Because today, you will see what happens when Jesus enters the battlefield. Have you ever noticed how there are wars that no one sees? Silent wars, fought in the darkest corners of the mind and heart. Wars that leave no marks on the body, but leave deep wounds in the soul. These are battles that often begin with a simple feeling of heaviness, an internal discomfort that is difficult to explain. Little by little, it grows, taking up space, taking away sleep, peace, balance. And the worst part is that on the outside, everything seems normal. The person continues to go to work, smile when they need to smile, live with their family, but inside, they are in ruins. Have you ever felt this? The truth is that many people live in a reality like this, where something invisible seems to control them. It's not just emotional problems or past traumas, it goes deeper. It's as if a strange force is operating behind it all, pushing bad thoughts, encouraging destructive decisions, feeding addictions, cultivating discouragement. And the more they try to free themselves, the more trapped they feel. Maybe you know someone like this. Maybe you're going through it yourself, that daily struggle not to explode, not to give up, not to fall. An invisible force trying to convince you that nothing will change, that there's no way out. And every day, hope grows weaker, as if faith is slowly being suffocated. It's a silent, constant, sneaky attack. It doesn't make any noise, but it brings down giants. Because the worst war isn't the one that happens outside, it's the one that eats away at you from the inside. Many people think that these conflicts are just the result of emotional weakness, negative thoughts, and lack of focus. But what if I told you that there is something more? That not all pain is just psychological, and not all weight is just the result of stress. There is a spiritual dimension that we often ignore, and it is in this dimension that many of these wars are being fought. The Bible is clear in saying that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces of evil. This is not an exaggeration or fanaticism. It is reality. And denying this is like going to war without knowing who the enemy is. It is trying to fight with the wrong weapons, defending ourselves with human strategies in the face of forces that demand something much greater. But all is not lost. Because there is someone who knows this war like no one else. Someone who has faced the darkest forces that exist and won. Someone who is not intimidated by demons, who does not back down in the face of evil, who does not abandon anyone, even when everyone else has given up. That someone is Jesus. In this video, you will see how he faced a legion of demons alone and emerged victorious, not by chance, not by luck, but because he has authority over everything that exists. And more than that, he not only won, but he freed. He transformed. He restored, because this is the heart of Jesus. He enters the invisible wars that no one else wants to see. He walks toward the pain that everyone avoids. He goes to those who seem too lost, too far away, too dirty. You will understand how this encounter between Jesus and a man possessed by demons reveals much more than a spiritual scene. It is a portrait of what he does to this day, freeing captives, opening the eyes of those trapped in darkness, restoring dignity to those who have been broken inside. And if you stay with us until the end, you will realize that this story can also be yours. Because no matter how invisible your war may be, Jesus has already seen you. He sees what no one else sees. He hears what no one else hears. He understands what even you can't explain. And he didn't come into the world just to give advice, promise better days, or ease your conscience. He came to set you free, to expel evil by the roots, to break chains you didn't even know existed, to take you by the hand and say, "You are not alone anymore." That power is still active. That authority is still manifest. And today, more than ever, it is time to stop running from the spiritual reality that surrounds us. Because ignoring this war will not stop it from happening. But acknowledging the battle is the first step to winning it. And when you acknowledge that and call it by the name that is above all names, something begins to change. So, if you feel like there is something invisible attacking you, stealing your peace, extinguishing your light, stay with me. What you are about to see next can change everything. Jesus didn't come to Gadara by accident. He crossed the sea, braved a storm, left the crowds behind, all for one man. One man no one wanted around, one man everyone had given up on. He lived among the tombs, screaming day and night, cutting himself with stones. There was no trace of humanity left in his eyes. In the eyes of the city, he was already lost. But Jesus doesn't see as men see. Where the world saw a lost cause, he saw a son who needed to be found. Gadara was a marginalized city, marked by practices considered impure in the eyes of the Jews. It was Gentile territory, a place where pigs were raised, a symbol of impurity. Institutional religion did not reach there. It was a forgotten territory, poorly spoken of, spiritually charged. But that is where Jesus went. He did not avoid difficult places. He faced them. And this reveals something precious to us. God's love is not limited to places considered holy. He goes where there is pain. He goes where no one else wants to go. How many times in your life have you felt like you were in a Gadara territory, an emotional or spiritual place where no one can find you? Where the days go by and it seems like you are buried in life, where your thoughts take you to inner caves, where your cries are muffled by routine and pain becomes a constant companion. Places in the soul where no one wants to be, where even you try to escape from yourself. It is in these types of places that Jesus chooses to enter. Gadara represents people who have been pushed away, people marked by rejection, trauma, and error. It is the space where religion does not reach, but grace invades. It is where the presence of Jesus shines brightest, because the darker the environment, the more visible the light becomes. His arrival there was more than a visit, it was a spiritual declaration. This is also the place of my presence. The Bible describes how, as soon as Jesus set foot on that land, the possessed man ran to him and knelt down. Notice, he didn't run away, he ran. That says a lot. Because even though he was taken over by a legion of evil spirits, there was something inside him that recognized the source of deliverance. This reveals that no matter how great the oppression, the human spirit is still capable of responding to the presence of God. And that gives us hope, because there are people who are in darkness, but still have a cry trapped in their soul, waiting to be heard. Now imagine the scene, a man completely overcome, with a wounded body, a disturbed mind, empty eyes, running towards the only one who can restore him to himself. And the most extraordinary thing is that Jesus does not back down. He is not frightened by the state of that man, nor by the smell of the cave, nor by the demonic presence. He stands firm. Because wherever Jesus arrives, he does not come as a spectator. He comes with authority, and this authority does not require shouting or exaggerated gestures. It is recognized even by hell. What happens there is not just an isolated scene. It is a revelation of the heart of God. He moves toward pain. He does not wait for you to be well before he approaches you. He does not demand that you be clean before he embraces you. He steps into the territory of chaos, walks among the tombs, faces the enemy, all to rescue those who have been forgotten. And if you feel like you are in a dark place, if there are caves in your soul, if your mind is agitated like that man in Gadara, know this: Jesus also goes through storms for you. He doesn't measure distance when it comes to reaching someone, nor is he intimidated by the level of spiritual filth. He is the only one who can see beyond what is visible. He sees what is behind the addiction, the anger, the bitterness. He sees the trauma that no one heard, the tear that was never explained, the cry that was held back. Jesus doesn't seek perfection. He answers the cry of the soul, even if that cry is silent. And there is something powerful in this, knowing that even in the most forgotten places in our history, God still steps in with his own feet. He doesn't send a representative. He comes himself. And when he comes, the spiritual environment doesn't stay the same. What was dormant begins to move. What was buried begins to breathe. What seemed sealed by evil begins to open to the light. Because when Jesus comes, nothing remains the same. Lucas never imagined his life would reach this point. At 34, he felt completely trapped inside himself. He grew up hearing that he wasn't enough. His father was absent and explosive. His mother was always too tired to listen. From an early age, he learned that silence was safer than asking for help. And so he piled up pain, fear, and guilt, one on top of the other, until his soul became a kind of prison. On the outside, he had a face like any other, but on the inside, he was in captivity. As a teenager, he tried to find solace in his friends, but soon realized that many of them were as lost as he was. He tried drugs for the first time at the age of 16, not out of curiosity, but because he wanted to escape. Escape from the internal noise, escape from the constant feeling of not belonging. And each escape took him further away from himself. From his 20s to his 30s, he experienced a succession of relapses, attempts at change, small new beginnings that didn't last. Until he reached a point where he stopped trying. People around him called him weak, maladjusted, even a lost cause, and he began to believe it. After all, how could he explain that emptiness? How could he justify that sadness that wouldn't go away, even when everything seemed normal? He wondered if it was just depression, or if there was something more. He had confusing dreams, bad thoughts, inexplicable feelings of oppression, as if he were being suffocated for no reason. And the worst part, he couldn't tell anyone. He was a prisoner, without a voice. Little by little, he became convinced that he would never change, that he was doomed to live like this, and this led him to isolation. He stopped responding to messages, avoided contact with his family, and spent his days locked in his room. Deep down, he still wanted to live, but not like that. And it was precisely in this darkness that something began to change. A video that appeared by chance, a sermon that seemed to have been written for him, a voice that said that Jesus still freed. Lucas didn't believe it right away, but that seed remained. In the following days, he began to have different dreams, dreams in which he cried, dreams in which someone called him by name, and for the first time in a long time, he felt something moving inside him, as if the stone in his chest began to crack. That was when he decided to look for a church. He entered timidly, afraid of being judged. But in that service, something broke him. The words seemed to pierce through his defenses, and when he heard the name of Jesus being proclaimed with authority, his eyes filled with tears. There, without knowing why, Lucas felt seen, not by a pastor, nor by the people around him, but by God, and that changed everything. He understood that his pain was not just emotional, that behind all of that there was a spiritual war, that there were voices that kept him trapped, thoughts that did not come only from him. And for the first time, he understood what spiritual oppression was. He understood that just like that man in Gadara, he too was being controlled by invisible chains. And most importantly, he understood that he didn't need to live like that anymore. Lucas began to seek deliverance. He went through trials, faced difficult days, cried a lot, but he kept going. Each prayer was a battle. Each step towards Jesus was a break with the past. And little by little, peace began to enter where before there was only confusion. The addiction lost strength. The dark thoughts began to be silenced. The will to live returned. And today, he still fights, but he is no longer alone, because now he knows that Jesus crossed the sea for him. Luke's story is no exception. It is a reflection of what many people experience in silence every day. People who seem fine, but are fighting internal wars that no one sees. And this shows us that behind many destructive behaviors, there is a soul in captivity. A soul that screams without sound, that bleeds inside, that needs an encounter with the one who has the authority to set it free, as happened with Luke, as happened with the man in Gadara, and as still happens with all those who decide to run to Jesus. The scene was intense. Jesus had set foot in Gadara, and immediately that possessed man ran towards him, but not to attack him. He knelt down. A body taken over by evil spirits, wounded, dirty, desperate, prostrating himself before the Son of God. It is impossible to ignore the spiritual power of that moment. That gesture revealed a profound truth. Jesus' authority was unquestionable. No evil force could resist him. No power of darkness could stand before him. The demons, who had taken control of the man, immediately began to beg. They knew who was there. "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me," they said. There was no physical battle. There was no resistance. The confrontation was spiritual, and even before any order was given, the darkness was already in despair. This reveals something powerful. The presence of Jesus disturbs evil. It does not need noise. It does not need a spectacle. Only his presence exposes, reveals, shakes. And perhaps that is why, when you get closer to Jesus, certain areas of your life begin to be shaken. Things that were dormant, hidden emotions, suppressed traumas, everything comes to the surface. It is no coincidence. It is because his light begins to invade territories that were taken over by shadows, and the darkness, even without wanting to, needs to retreat. Jesus does not shout, does not act aggressively. He simply asks, "What is your name?" And the answer comes, Legion. This name is not coincidental. Legion was a unit of the Roman army made up of 6,000 soldiers, a symbol of occupation, of total domination. That response revealed that this man was not just being influenced by a spirit, he was under siege, occupied by a spiritual multitude. It was a war within a single body. And this makes us think about how many people today live this way. People who carry overlapping pains, anxieties, destructive impulses, outbursts of anger, unresolved traumas, and think that all of this is just emotional. But what if there is more? What if, behind these struggles, there is also a spiritual dimension at work? When someone feels that they are being suffocated from several sides at the same time, perhaps they are living exactly what this man was living. A battle against a legion. Not a metaphor, but a spiritual reality that needs to be confronted with authority. And the only authority that the darkness respects is that of Jesus. He does not argue with the demons. He does not negotiate. He commands. And they obey. The demons, already knowing that they would be cast out, began to beg. They asked not to be thrown out of that region. They begged to enter a herd of pigs. This reveals something profound about evil. It does not want to leave easily. Even when defeated, it tries to stay close. It knows that it has lost the battle, but it still wants to observe. It still wants to influence. But Jesus does not give them room for that. He allows the legion to go into the pigs, and then more than 2,000 animals throw themselves off the cliff. The scene was shocking. The pigs were running, falling, dying. But in the spiritual world, it was the manifestation of a complete victory. A man who had been chained inside was now free. A mind that had been dominated was now clean. A body that had cried out for help was now at peace. Deliverance had been established, and the atmosphere of Gadara would never be the same again. Many people wonder why Jesus allowed the demons to go into the pigs. But the real question is, what is more valuable? The life of a man or the economic value of a herd of cattle? For Jesus, there is no doubt. That man's soul was worth more than anything else. And this teaches us about spiritual priority. Sometimes deliverance comes with visible losses, but no material loss compares to the gain of a restored soul. And it is curious to note that after this, the city did not celebrate. On the contrary, they were afraid. They asked Jesus to leave. This continues to this day. Not everyone deals well with the manifestation of God's power. Not everyone is ready to see the freedom of someone who was previously shunned. The transformation is frightening, because when someone is truly freed, they are never the same again. And this bothers those who have learned to live around the imprisonment of others. If you believe that Jesus has the authority to deliver any area of your life, declare it right now in the comments. I believe in the power that sets you free. As a form of recognition, we on the channel will like your comment and pray for you. Yes, each comment will be read carefully because we believe that those who take a stand in faith have already taken the first step towards transformation. And prepare your heart, because what comes next may be exactly what you needed to hear to break away from everything that has held you back for so long. Don't leave now. The next minute could change everything. The name Legion was not just a symbolic answer. It was a revelation of what was really going on in that man. He was filled with many. Inside there was a multitude. Each spirit had a function, an intention, an area of attack. And this teaches us that evil often does not act alone. It operates in a network. It works strategically in a coordinated manner. Just like a Roman legion, it invades, occupies, and establishes itself. It is not enough to enter. It wants to dominate. And when we look at the world today, we realize that many people are living under the weight of this spiritual occupation. They cannot explain why certain patterns repeat themselves, why they fall into the same mistakes, why they live in cycles of failure, sabotage, self-destruction. The names may be anxiety, addiction, rejection, jealousy, anger, pride. But behind these names, there may be invisible voices sustaining internal chains. We are not saying that everything is possession, but rather that there are spiritual realities that profoundly affect the human mind and behavior. The Legion's strategy is to suffocate identity, to make the person become confused, to lose themselves, and little by little pain becomes part of the routine. Anger becomes an automatic response. Loneliness becomes a constant companion. The person begins to live on autopilot without knowing where they lost control. And the most tragic thing is that many times they get used to this captivity. They learn to live with the weight to disguise the war. But that is not life, that is survival. And Jesus did not come to teach us how to survive. He came to teach us how to live in freedom. It's important to understand, the enemy isn't just interested in causing pain. He wants to erase purpose. Because when you lose control of your mind, you also lose focus of your calling. When you're trapped in thoughts of guilt, fear, or confusion, you can't hear God's direction. And that's the plan. It's not enough to hurt. It has to paralyze. That's why deliverance isn't just emotional, it's spiritual. And it begins when we recognize that there's a war going on beyond what we can see. Jesus upon hearing the name Legion, is not impressed. He does not react with astonishment, does not move away, does not protect himself. He remains there, looking into the man's eyes. Because Jesus does not talk to demons, he addresses the soul. He speaks to what is still human, to faith, to truth. And this is what breaks the structures of hell. The fact that Jesus insists on seeing what no one else sees. He continues to believe that there is life, even when everything seems to be taken over by death. Have you ever stopped to think about how many voices have been speaking within you? How many words spoken by others or even by yourself have been accumulating, shaping your perception, feeding lies? Have you ever caught yourself repeating things like, "I'm good for nothing, nobody cares about me, I'll always be like this"? Maybe these phrases aren't just yours. Maybe they're constructs that have been nurtured over time. And today, Jesus is asking, what is your name? Who are you really behind all of this? When he asks this, it's not because he doesn't know. It's because he wants you to realize what has been defining you. He wants you to face what has taken up too much space. He wants you to name what needs to be torn out. Because only that which is exposed can be cast out. And when the light of Christ illuminates a dark area of the soul, there is no more room for deception. The truth sets you free. And it begins with an honest acknowledgement. Yes, I need help. Yes, there are things in me that I cannot overcome on my own. Yes, I want to be free. And here's the good news. You can be, just like that man was. Just like Luke began to be. Because no matter how big the legion, Jesus is still bigger. He doesn't need time or elaborate rituals. He just needs to be invited. And when he is welcomed, he comes in, cleanses, restores. He doesn't negotiate with evil. He drives it out. He doesn't numb the pain. He heals. He doesn't mask the war. He wins. And when he wins, peace returns. Judgment returns. Identity is restored. If you believe that Jesus has the authority to deliver any area of your life, declare it right now in the comments. I believe in the power that sets you free. As a form of recognition, we on the channel will like your comment and pray for you. Yes, each comment will be read carefully because we believe that those who take a stand in faith have already taken the first step towards transformation. And get ready, because what comes next may be exactly what you needed to hear to break free from everything that has been holding you back for so long. Don't leave now. The next minute could change everything. The deliverance happened, but it wasn't silent. It had visible, striking, even frightening consequences. When the demons were cast out of the man, Jesus allowed them to enter a herd of pigs that were grazing nearby. And what happened next was one of the strangest and most shocking moments in Scripture. More than 2,000 pigs went crazy, ran toward the cliff, and threw themselves into the sea. It was the external reflection of an internal war that had just been won. This scene may seem extreme, even incomprehensible, but it carries a profound meaning. According to Jewish culture, pigs were considered impure. They represented that which was outside the covenant, consecration, and holiness. And now, these animals became the temporary container of that which could no longer inhabit man. It was as if all spiritual burden was transferred to that which symbolized impurity, and their death, a portrait of the end of the dominion of darkness. There is something powerful about this moment. True liberation has visible effects. Not always dramatic, like a desperate herd, but always noticeable. Because when Jesus drives out evil, the environment changes, behavior changes. The atmosphere around us changes. People notice, and that can be uncomfortable. Someone's freedom confronts those who are still imprisoned, and not everyone celebrates when someone is set free. The men who were taking care of the pigs ran away and warned the city, and when the people arrived, the scene was different. The man who had previously been seen as a threat was now sitting dressed in perfect judgment. That image was the greatest evidence that something extraordinary had happened. But instead of rejoicing, they were afraid. They rejected Jesus. They asked him to leave. not because of the deliverance, but because of the change it caused. There are those who feel more comfortable with familiar chaos than with the order brought by God. There are those who fear transformation because it challenges comfort zones and destabilizes old structures. Jesus' presence there brought to light the contrast between the old and the new life, and not everyone was ready to see it. Sometimes the freedom of one confronts the imprisonment of many, and this collision generates rejection. That is exactly what happened. Jesus restored a whole man, restored his conscience, his dignity, and his peace. But the people of the city lost their herd, and for them, economic value spoke louder than the value of a life. They preferred to lose Jesus rather than deal with the disruption that his presence caused in their systems. And this is a choice that still happens today. People who prefer to maintain unhealthy routines rather than face the radical change that God's presence brings about. But Jesus did not force them to stay. He did not argue, debate, or demand recognition. He simply complied and left. This teaches us something profound. The Lord never imposes himself where he is not wanted. He arrives with grace, but he also leaves with respect. He even respects the free will of those who reject him after witnessing the miracle. And yet, he leaves something, or rather, someone. The man who had been set free did not go with Jesus. He stayed, and this was no accident, it was on purpose. The same man who had been the cause of fear would now be a living witness to what God can do. Where there had been destruction, there was now healing. Where there had been madness, there was now clarity. Where there had been darkness, there was now light, and none of this could be ignored. God's presence transforms, but his absence also speaks. The city remained silent about what it rejected, but it could not erase what it saw, because there is no way to undo a restored life. And this is the mark of true liberation. It remains. It continues to speak when everyone else is silent. It disturbs, inspires, denounces, confronts, and most importantly, it points to the God who liberates. Perhaps this is why so many people, when they go through a radical change, feel that their environment no longer recognizes them. It is as if they are back in the same place, but everything has changed. The way people look at them, the space they occupy, the way they are treated. But this disconnection, as painful as it may seem, is part of the process. Liberation repositions you. It takes you out of caves, but it also takes you out of systems that benefited from your imprisonment. The man who had been set free was now a living sign, a constant reminder of what heaven can do in a body that everyone else had discarded. And this role, though lonely, is essential, because there are people who will never enter a church, but will hear your story. People who will never read a verse, but will not forget what you have become. Your deliverance is more than personal. It is prophetic. And even when the city asked Jesus to leave, his testimony echoed in the streets, in memories, in people's eyes, because when God acts, no one can pretend that nothing happened. The scene was striking. He who had once lived in the tombs, who had screamed day and night, who had cut himself with stones, was now sitting, dressed, and in his right mind. 3 simple expressions, but loaded with meaning. Sitting indicated rest, stability, self-control. Dressed spoke of dignity, of shelter, of protection. In his right mind revealed that his mind, previously fragmented, was now aligned, restored, at peace. This was not just a miracle, it was a complete reconstruction. There were no more screams, no more wide eyes, no more aggressive gestures. What there was now was silence, serenity, sobriety, and this silence spoke louder than any words. Chaos gave way to order. Confusion was replaced by clarity. Anguish was overcome by peace. That man was no longer the same, and not just on the outside, but deep down inside. He had been remade, reconfigured, restored. That which seemed lost had been returned. God's restoration often happens in layers. First, he breaks the chains. Then he heals the wounds. Then he restores what was taken away, a sense of worth, of identity, of destiny. Because true liberation doesn't stop with the expulsion of evil. It continues until the glory of God fills all the space that was once the domain of darkness. And that's what we see here, not just liberation, but the occupation of grace. The void left by the legion was now filled with God's presence. It is interesting that the text mentions that he was clothed. This may seem like a detail, but it is extremely symbolic, because one of the first effects of sin in Eden was to expose the nakedness of the human being. Shame entered, and with it the attempt to cover oneself with leaves. Ever since then, humanity has carried this need to hide what was broken. But here, in that moment in Gadara, what we see is the opposite. A man covered by God, clothed in something that was not just fabric, it was restored dignity. And when he says that he was in perfect judgment, we understand that the liberation also touched his mind. And this is crucial, because many live imprisoned not in the body, but in the mind. Confused thoughts, constant fear, panic attacks, inner voices that do not cease. The mind is a battlefield, and when Jesus enters, he brings order. He aligns thoughts with the truth. He removes lies and plants new convictions, and this is visible. Words change, choices change, countenances change. The transformation was so profound that the man wanted to leave with Jesus. He had found his answer. He knew who had set him free. He wanted to follow the Master, to live by his side, to leave everything behind. But Jesus surprises him with an unexpected answer. No, go back home. Tell what God has done for you. And there, we understand another layer of this story. Because sometimes the calling is not to stay in the boat with Jesus. It is to stay where everything happened, so that the light continues to shine in that place. The man who was shunned, who was a source of fear, would now be a messenger. The voice that once spread cries of pain would now announce words of life. The mouth that had been silent for years of captivity would now proclaim grace. This is typical of God, turning the weakest point into a platform, using scars as messages, raising testimonies in the place where there was only shame. His story would now be a living sermon. Wherever he walked, transformation would speak before he opened his mouth. And there is something profoundly beautiful about this calling, because it did not require theology, it did not require training. The only requirement was to have experienced the miracle, and that man had. He was the message itself. And this is something we need to remember. Your story has power. Your transformation has weight. There are people who will only believe when they hear it from someone who has been in the same place as them. And maybe you are that person. Maybe you are the living sign that God wants to raise up in your home, in your neighborhood, at your work. That man came back, and where he had been shunned, he was now heard. And where there had been fear, there was now hope. And where there had been silence, there was now proclamation. Because when Jesus transforms, he also sends. He doesn't just heal, he commissions. Deliverance is never the end. It is the beginning of a new mission. And when God restores, he doesn't just return what was lost. He establishes something greater, a life of purpose. We have reached the end of this journey. But what we are experiencing here is not just an ancient story. It is a living revelation of what Jesus continues to do today. We talked about a forgotten man, isolated, imprisoned by forces the world did not understand. A man who lived among the dead, wounded, rejected, without identity. And we saw what happens when Jesus enters this story. We saw that Jesus crosses seas, braves storms, and treads into territories no one else wants to tread, just to reach someone the world had already discarded. We saw that his presence exposes and disarms all evil, because hell cannot resist his authority. We learned that the name Legion does not define who we are, and that Jesus does not call us because of what imprisons us, but because of what he sees in us. And we understand that liberation is not just the end of torment, it is the beginning of a mission, is the birth of a new identity. Now it's your turn. If you've come this far, it's because something inside you knows that you need to transform. You are not here by chance. There is a purpose in every word you heard. But the big question now is, what are you going to do with it? If you are truly committed to your deliverance, to your restoration, to your calling, prove it right now. Leave us a comment. I am territory of freedom. Yes, write it down. Declare it with faith. This phrase is your spiritual positioning, and we on the channel will like your comment as a way of recognizing your commitment, because here, every person who stands up for the truth has our respect and our prayers. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because this is just the beginning. Every week, you will find words here that encourage you to grow, break through, become stronger, and align yourself with what God has for your life. And before we leave, there's one more thing. What was the code that turned the key inside you? Comment below. We want to know which part spoke to your heart the most, and if this video reached you, share with as many people as possible. Be generous. Just as you have been blessed with this content, bless other lives also. And now, to continue your journey of liberation, don't leave without watching the 2 videos that are appearing here on the screen. Each of them brings revelations that will strengthen you even more. Watch carefully, because the next key may be in them, and it may be exactly what you need to experience complete transformation. Go with faith, because now you know Jesus crosses any sea just to reach you.